This is CBN NewsWatch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this special edition of CBN NewsWatch. I'm George Thomas. Today, we're exploring the truth about one of the most iconic characters in early American history. Look, if you look at the nation and our founding as a nation, without Jamestown, there would be no America. And without Pocahontas, there would be no Jamestown. But who was she and how did she help the first English settlers to survive? Gordon Robertson brings us her story.
She fascinates generations of people across the globe. Disney's portrayal of her captured imaginations. But who was Pocahontas?
She's a mystery. She's made out of English words which have their purposes, and there's almost no neutral Pocahontas.
There is no black and white on this. You know, there's a whole lot of gray, a million shades of gray.
Pocahontas didn't write anything down. There was no written language of her people. So everything we know of Pocahontas comes to us through the observations of Englishmen.
One has to try and find out more than just the Disney version.
They made her like a cartoon character, like she might have been some kind of legend or something that didn't really exist.
She was an essential part of the Powhatan Confederacy.
We were taught that she betrayed her people.
And what about John Smith?
Smith, he's pretty quick to publicize himself.
John Smith is probably the person who is most involved in creating the Pocahontas of legend, and it's hard to tell the legend from the truth in his writings.
John Smith wrote that Pocahontas rescued him during captivity and saved his life, a claim doubted by many scholars.
He has 3 accounts of his time in Jamestown and his captivity there, and it's only in the 3rd time of writing, 1624, that he talks about her as the person who rescued him.
Legend says, you know, she was Powhatan's favorite daughter. That's why he saved John Smith, because she fell in love and asked for it. Not so much.
I believe that was a part of the Powhatan adoption ceremony.
The rescue is, I think, improbable, but of course there's only one person who wrote anything down. There's only one witness, and that's John Smith. In real life, she married John Rolfe. In the legend, she will forever be in love with John Smith, because John Smith told us so.
Pocahontas isn't a myth, but why is her story relevant to us today? In the early years of the Jamestown settlement, the colonists set up trade with the Algonquin Indians and their chief, Powhatan. Powhatan's territory extended hundreds of miles.
They really landed right in the middle of Powhatan's empire.
When the English came here, they used their points of reference in the way that they had government structured, so they called him a king, but he was really a high chief. And he had about 32 tribes, we think, and there was a werewance over each one of them, or a werewant squaw, and they would be like advisors to him. So it was really pretty representative of kind of like what we have today.
In his negotiations with the English, it's likely that Powhatan saw opportunity.
He wanted the metal tools, the arms. He didn't have any of those things. Could have revolutionized life in Powhatan. So he adopted them in like he would have any other tribe, so that he would have access to those resources, because it would strengthen his political position in the state.
Ungapo. Hello. Ungapo. Corn. We need the corn.
The settlers were dependent on the natives for food, but also wanted Powhatan and his people to come under their control.
The colony was struggling. It's the story of all the English colonies. They couldn't take hold, they couldn't live, they couldn't feed themselves.
In 1611, after several years of conflict, Alexander Whitaker arrived in the midst of this turmoil. The Anglican minister left a comfortable life in England to come to the New World.
He was a young man, very, very well educated, comes from a long family of scholars, Uncle Lawrence was a noted Anglo-Saxon scholar. Uncle Alexander, besides being a great fisherman, is also the accidental inventor of bottled beer. But yeah, very well-educated family, very well-educated young man, went to Eton, went to Cambridge. This is the man who's coming over here. He's going to have church twice a day, 3 times on Sunday. Sunday's when he's going to preach his sermon. But morning and evening, he will have a service here, and everyone will attend. That is the law.
Alexander Whitaker's concern was conversion of the Native Americans, as well as pastoring the English that were there and reproving them for their failure to live up to the gospel when they didn't.
When we look at Whitaker, we see not John Calvin. We don't see Calvin thumping on his pulpit, screaming about, fire and brimstone coming down. We see more Billy Graham, who is reasoning. He's saying, look, this is what we believe, this is why we believe it.
He recognized that the Native Americans in Virginia are not a whole lot different than the English were back before they knew Christianity, when England was essentially a conglomeration of various tribes.
He's looking at them and saying, okay, they're like us. They're part of God's creation, and they don't know the true way. We need to show them this. We need to bring them into the right path.
In 1612, Whitaker wrote Good News from Virginia, a sermon he preached and then sent to the colony's sponsors in London. The sermon was based on a passage from Ecclesiastes 11. Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again. In spite of the colony's economic losses, the sermon moved the founders of the colony so much that they published it throughout England.
Jamestown was a commercial venture in the sense that people invested money in it, sort of like venture capitalists, expecting to get money back.
Wherefore, I do not marvel that there have been great discouragements and many adversaries at this plantation. For the devil, knowing that where Christ wins, he looseth.
Whitaker castigated the English who were investing only from a monetary standpoint. He said, we need colonists to come who will really live the Christian life and have a concern for being used of God as catalysts for the conversion of the Native Americans.
Whitaker's commitment to building good relations with the Native Americans was about to be tested.
The English didn't understand the codes of respect and honor that the Powhatans lived by. So when they would go in and take up land without asking, it was an affront to him and an insult. And so he retaliated. And that's when things started to turn, when they were taking land that he didn't give them. And he actually said, why take by force that which would be given you for the asking?
It fairly quickly broke down in some difficult situations, and there were people killed on both sides, hard feelings, and captives taken.
Chief Powhatan, he's as sharp as any European monarch. He's on the ball. He keeps the English off balance. He keeps them guessing. He allies with them when he wants to. He fights them when he has to.
At this time, the Native Americans, the Powhatan Indians, had a number of English in captivity and also some guns.
The colonists wanted to convince Powhatan to return the English hostages and weapons. A sea captain named Samuel Argall came up with a plan. He decided to kidnap the chief's favorite daughter and hold her for ransom.
She really became this pawn in the middle of this life or death game that was taking place between these two groups of people who I think had good reason to deeply mistrust the motives of the other one.
Coming up, Pocahontas meets the man who will radically change her life. And he's not Captain John Smith. See how their friendship brought two worlds together right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. Most of us are familiar with the legends of Pocahontas, but what's the truth behind the myth? In part 2 of CBN's Pocahontas docudrama, you'll meet the man who captivated Pocahontas' favorite daughter, and he's not Captain John Smith.
Pocahontas, whose given name was Matoaka, was no stranger to the colonists. As a little girl, she brought gifts of food to Jamestown. She also played games with the English boys, living up to her nickname, Pocahontas, which means naughty or mischievous one.
Pocahontas seemed to have been beloved by the colonists and by her peoples, the Powhatan, as well. I think the Englishmen saw this innocent child. You know, this wasn't someone who was going to attack you or anything like that. And I think similarly to the Powhatan, this was obviously an example of the innocence and goodness of their people and a symbol of her father's sort of benevolent power.
I think her personality was light. I think she was obviously full of love and generosity and grace. So she was already royal before anybody ever called her a princess.
When Chief Powhatan heard that his favorite daughter had been captured, he released the prisoners, but told the settlers that all the guns were broken or lost. Sir Thomas Dale, the governor of the Virginia colony, didn't believe Powhatan's story, and he refused to release Pocahontas. In the spring of 1613, Dale sent Pocahontas to the neighboring settlement of Henricus, under the care of his trusted friend, the Reverend Alexander Whitaker.
I was reading from Matthew.
Whitaker spent the next year teaching Pocahontas about the Bible.
Just one of my favorites. It is called the Sermon on the Mount.
When Alexander Whitaker arrived, he would have had the Book of Common Prayer with this revised catechism. He would have had a Bible, probably the Geneva Bible. So this is what Alexander Whitaker would have taught Pocahontas. And she, in question and answer form, would have learned all the basic doctrines about who is God, who is Jesus Christ, what it means to be a Christian.
And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven."
It's not conversion at the point of an axe or a spear or a sword. This is a logical conversion. You know, this is what we believe, this is why we believe it. Paul talks about the unknown God. He finds the altar and he says, this is the altar to the unknown God. He says, I'm going to tell you about that fella. This is what I see Whitaker doing.
I think that Alexander Whitaker became like a father to her as he was teaching her about things that she didn't know in her mind, but in her spirit she knew already. And I think he just brought it into focus for her and helped her to understand it. And so once she did understand it, then her relationship with the Lord became more intimate.
The irony is she probably knew the Christian faith better than many British people who had not really been very well instructed in the faith in which they'd been baptized as babies, you know, and grown up in a state church situation where the Christian faith was often very nominal.
There were tribes that believed in God, the Creator is what they called him, or a great giver of life. They did not know Jesus, and she wanted to bring that liberty and that freedom to her people.
While Pocahontas was in the care of Reverend Whitaker, she caught the eye of another resident of Henricus, a young entrepreneur and widower named John Rolfe.
He was able to produce a kind of tobacco that became the saving of the colony, Virginia Tobacco. So he was an important person commercially for the colony.
I think that he may have originally come to her for her knowledge of growing tobacco. But he fell in love with her because she was who she was. And it was truly a love relationship between the two of them.
A deeply pious man, Rolfe was concerned that his motives in courting a native woman may be misunderstood. He wrestled with his convictions, but in the end, he followed his heart and wrote to the governor requesting permission to marry Pocahontas.
To Sir Thomas Dale, Governor, Henricus Settlement. My chief intent and purpose is to strive with all the power of my body and mind for the glory of God and for the conversion to the true knowledge of Jesus Christ, Pocahontas, to whom my hearty and best thoughts are, and have a long time been so entangled and enthralled in so intricate a labyrinth that I was weary of finding a way out. But God has opened the gate and led me by the hand that I might plainly see safe paths to tread. As I proceed, my daily prayers shall be to bring to pass such good that all the world may truly say, "This is the work of God, and it is marvelous in our eyes."
I think it's one of the most remarkable documents in history because how honest he is really with himself and his own motivations. He hints at some of the feelings he was having for her and so on, and even the physical attractiveness. And so a lot of soul searching about that. But I think he was sincere, and I think God was in that.
When I read the letter that he wrote asking for permission to marry Pocahontas, I could feel the integrity of what he was saying. He said, this is not a lustful thing. This is not something that's a political thing or anything. I love her, and we want to be married, and I don't want it to be seen as anything other than a sincere desire to be with the woman I love.
In March of 1614, before Rolfe's letter was delivered, Dale sailed up the Virginia coast to try again to exchange Pocahontas for the pillaged guns. When Dale's group arrived, they were met by two of Pocahontas' half-brothers. Although they were happy to see their sister unharmed, they refused to return the guns. Pocahontas responded with news of her own.
Up next, she only lived 21 years, but her impact has been remembered through the ages. We conclude with the life and legacy of American legend Pocahontas in a moment. And welcome back, folks. You're watching the CBN News Channel. As we learned before the break, Pocahontas became a Christian thanks to the teaching of the Reverend Alexander Whitaker. In many ways, her newfound faith helped her to bring her Native American nation and the British Empire together, allowing a new nation to be born. Here now is the conclusion of our special program, Pocahontas.
In March of 1614, before Rolfe's letter was delivered, Dale sailed up the Virginia coast to try again to exchange Pocahontas for the pillaged guns. When Dale's group arrived, they were met by two of Pocahontas' half-brothers. Although they were happy to see their sister unharmed, they refused to return the guns. Pocahontas responded with news of her own.
If my father loved me, he would value me more than old swords, guns, and axes. So I will stay with the English, who have always loved me.
It's kind of like the Ruth story. I want to be with you. Your people are my people, and your God is my God. And that's basically what she did.
Pocahontas returned to Henricus, and Reverend Whitaker baptized her with a new name from the Bible, Rebecca, the mother of two nations in Genesis.
It wouldn't be a name that would be given without thought, without Christian thought. So there's a sense in which she is possibly being the person who will join the nations, the Indian nation, the Powhatan nation, and the English nation.
In the Powhatan culture, you would have a name and then you would be given other names according to different things that you had done in your life. Warriors, for example, would be given additional names based on their exploits in war. Naming her Rebecca was taking on a Christian identity.
This young lady is sharp. She knows her place in the world in a lot more ways than we would normally think of. She is coming from two different worlds, and she joins those two worlds together.
I think her relationship with God was a very profound relationship, a very intimate relationship, and that she received instruction from him and she knew exactly who she was working for.
The name Rebecca also echoed the meaning of her given name, Matoaka, or bright stream between the hills.
She ended up being an emissary between two nations and being a part of the birthing of this nation, because she really laid the foundation for that relationship and for that colony to survive.
That's not the entire story of Pocahontas. Because of her efforts, there was peace for 8 years, allowing the new colony to grow. In fact, her marriage to John Rolfe cemented the covenant between two nations. If you want to know the conclusion of her story, we'll be right back to tell you how you can get CBN's Pocahontas DVD. Stay with us, folks. We'll be back right after this. We hope you've enjoyed our docudrama on the life of Pocahontas and the unsung hero of that era, Alexander Whitaker. If you want to watch the complete story, you can order a DVD from CBN for any dollar amount. Just go to cbn.com to find out more. Well, folks, that is it for this special edition of CBN Newswatch. We hope you'll join us again next time. From all of us here at the headquarters of the Christian Broadcasting Network, goodbye and God bless.